All right, let's talk about what it would take to make 1700. What I found as a teacher and a player is that around this level is where players have the ability to try to get what might be called chess culture, or a deeper intuitive understanding of the strategic aspects of the game. And that's, of course, not just you, but your competitors will also be doing that. And just to be clear, as you're moving up the ranks here, you are within some of the highest percentage category of players in the world, right? And just imagine in any field, whether it's a sport or something else, you start getting up into the high 90th percentiles. There's going to be some deep competition. So this aspect of a deeper intuitive feeling, or chess culture, if you will, is something that our program is then going to introduce. Now, there are some more basic things that you are going to need to reach 1700, but I wanted to stress this aspect of chess culture because it's something that will now be part of the journey. Now, it already was part of the journey, but it's really now that you're beginning to have a good enough grasp on, say, the material aspect of the game and tempo, that you're beginning ready to understand some higher, or rather third dimension of the game, with initiative, with quality of position, structure, that kind of stuff. So let's get into it. And the first thing we do, as always in these videos, I'll just talk briefly about what we mean by 1700. That's 1700 FIDE, so about 1775 USCF, and then ChessCom and Lichess inflated above that. Okay, now, something I will stress in our dojo scoreboard here is that in addition to all of our usual stuff, what we have here I really like are some quality chess books. And that is simply like you have earned the right to read these books when you get here. So the first thing that I want to mention is Capablanca's Best Chess Endings. And it's important to see that endings are not just some dry thing. And what I like about this book is it's an introduction to endings as a fan. So as an appreciation, if you will, right? Yes, there's going to be some technical aspects to the end game. Yes, there's going to be some weird tactics that you have to learn. But this book just offers you a glimpse into why the end game is beautiful, and that understanding will help you. And that's what I mean by developing an intuitive feel for the game. Another book that is similar is The Art of Attack by Vukovic, a famous older book, really, and there you're trying to get a sense of what the initiative is and how to use it. Also, in our classic games, we're doing 45 games by Tal. These are not simply like the fancy games either. These are like the big struggles of his generation with the best players of his generation. So a really great vehicle for understanding all aspects of chess, but especially initiative and imbalance. And I strongly recommend people do that with training partners. Now, by the way, this program, as I like to say, you do not have to join the program to do the things that we're doing. It's just we're trying to facilitate it, make it easier for people to do it, especially in a cohort. And studying the tall games, for example, I think great to do in a group, really good. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about openings. Excuse me. And we're going to talk about game review as we get into it here. And so I'm going to use the game, as I usually do, to talk about some of the key problems that people have in getting to 1700. So here we go. Here's our game. And what we're doing here is the game between Headcanon and Morphe Fan. Both of these are players in the dojo, but let's say that it's important to note that the notes you see here are by Morphe Fan. Now, one of the main features, a couple of features about this game that I want to highlight that are typical of the struggles of a player reaching 1700 is, first one he mentions, better time usage. Now, a technical problem that all of us have, not just people in the program, is how do you write down your times in these notes, and he doesn't actually do it. But the problem is simply, like, let's say I have this problem for years. I write down my times on a score sheet, and then I have to input them, and then I input them manually. And it'd be great if ChessBase or somebody had a bot that was able to track the times so that I could get a graph of it and something nice. In any case, sometimes people don't write down the times. I encourage you to do so. But before we get carried away by technical questions, I want to stress that one of the beautiful things about going over your games is writing down something simple like better time usage. And we will see the positions where he needed to use his time better. Now, important to see that just because you wrote it down doesn't mean you're going to get it right the next game. You might not get it right in the next game after that. But by writing it down and becoming aware of it, you are on the path to using your time better. Now, oftentimes for me as a player, I spend too long. That's been my complaint. But at this level, what we're generally seeing, especially in games that are played online, is that people are playing the critical positions too quickly. And we've seen this in the lower level too, but this is where it's going to start getting really critical because your opponents will punish your tactical mistakes at this level. So what we have to understand is the time needs to be used when the position becomes tactical. And you see, this is actually a part of chess culture, really. That because at this level you are starting to develop a chess intuition, you will be able to play those moves quickly. And the moves where you need to think about the tactical consequences, you will use your time on those. Okay? And that is something that will be developed. That distinction between an intuitive position and a tactical position is something that is developed with what we're calling chess culture. And if you don't understand what I mean by that at this point, that's fine. But going through the program, I think, will help you make that distinction, especially between the intuitive and the calculation. And there's going to be some moments in this game where we're going to talk about it. Okay, so let's get into it. And I always want to turn off my own volume here so that it's not making a click-clack. So one of the things that we see right away is we see that Morphy-Fan has unfortunately watched a YouTube video. Now, the thing with the YouTube videos about openings is they can they're often a distraction from the training program. So it's not like I don't want you to ever watch opening videos, but they can be a distraction. Now, what do I mean? Well, bishop c4 and bishop b5 are both fine moves. But the thing that I want you to see is, first of all, this position is in the dojo training program, the dojo aggressive repertoire for white. It's a great opening. And what you really want is a couple things. And the most important is to understand what the dynamics of the position are. So let me just put it in my words to give you a sense. F4 is controversial because it is not a developing move. It doesn't help your pieces develop in any obvious way. And furthermore, it will eventually block the bishop on c1. The dream of this move, however, can be expressed as a developing move because later the rook will be behind it, and maybe the rook will be developed through the f-pawn. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more what I mean, but basically the pawn needs to move. Now, if the pawn moves, you get a lot of positions that will look like a King's Indian. We're reversed, right? We're playing King's Indian as if we were white. And notice in the King's Indian, a lot of times you go plop and you go plop. Excuse me. Let me do that. Plop's better. You go here and you go here, and then you push it, and then you bring your knight back, yada, yada. But notice in the King's Indian, there's always friction on the pawn. If you imagine with reverse colors, the pawn would be here, right? And that friction means that the pawn on f4 will move. And it's very important to understand right here that your dream is for Federico the f-pawn to move. If you do not understand it, you will languish. And we see that's what happens in white in this game. So bishop c4, bishop b5, it's important to understand that what you are doing is you are getting rid. Whether it's bishop c4, bishop c5, you are wanting to get rid of that bishop because that is your bad bishop. That is your so-called King's Indian bishop. Get rid of that clown. He goes. He goes. We don't need him. You know? This will be our good bishop because our pawns are in light colors. And of course, our pawns are pointing this way. We are going to attack. And white will have to trust that there is an attack. Bishop c4 is playable. I love what he did. Bishop b5. And I love this move. And he says some stuff about it, never mentioning, though, the bishop. Really important. Furthermore, what you really need to understand here is that black has a dream too. His dream is that his unopposed bishop achieves freedom and control of the light squares. At the moment, it's not so easy for him to do. Now, a really cool thing, let's want to talk about openings for a second. I'm going to talk a little bit about openings, in fact. In the dojo training program, I give this position with d3, and I'll talk about why I like d3 better than castles in a second. Knight f6, castles, castles, queen e1, and we will be intending f5 and queen h4 and mate. And I talk a little bit about that in the video that we have on the website. But what I want to stress is with our dojo training program, what we have is marked in the file. We have this position marked as a sparring position. So you will play with somebody who is around your level because they're in your cohort. And you will have the position as white and you will have it as black. So you will also try to see it from the black perspective. And you will play it again and again and talk about it, hopefully, with your opponent afterwards. And you might find an opponent who maybe doesn't play this as either white or black, and that's fine. They will simply be participating in your opening sparring and maybe get something out of it themselves. All right, now here's the interesting thing. Openings aren't going to help you that much. I know you think, so many people think they're going to help you. But let me say, as a coach, I think this kind of opening sparring at this level will really help you. Because if you can develop a solid sense of what's going on in this position, the dynamics of the position, and really deepen your intuition, first of all, it will give you better results. But more importantly, it will give you a sense of a dynamic in a given position that you've deepened yourself into. And that deepening will really translate to a variety of positions throughout your chess spectrum of positions, right? It's like you will have a vocabulary of positions, middle game positions that you can play, attacking positions you can play, and that feel will translate to other positions. So again, I think with a lot of players, they will be learning openings with the idea of that specific opening. They'll be like, oh, how do I crush this fool? And I want that sensation of power, with a given opening. I understand it. And that's seductive. But as a coach, what I want you to see is that from my perspective, what's truly valuable about it is you are getting a feel for a given position. And that will be something that will broaden your chess horizons in other areas of the game. Okay, so let's get into it. Castles. And why is this controversial? Well, we are giving black the opportunity to maybe play c4. And why is that something I'm not totally thrilled about? Well, because I'm going to have to play either b3 or d3. And I'd rather not give him any opportunity to open the position, right? That's what he wants. He wants desperately to open the position for his bishop. Now, is c4 the end of the world for us? No, but we just don't want it. We just don't want to even give him the chance, which is why d3, I think, is better. Black doesn't play it. Queen e1. Now, interestingly, black plays c4 here. And Morphe fan gives it a question mark. And one of the things I want to say about c4 is it probably is, as Murphy Fan says, technically a mistake. But I do want to say that it is ideologically correct. You do want to do something quickly because you are in danger of getting wasted with queen h4 and f5. It is a very devastating attack, and there you can really see, in fact, let's just play a move. You'll see this move. If you play this position a lot, you'll see that move. The attack comes very quickly. It is mate. Mate is on the horizon. It is surprisingly fast. Okay? So, c4, again, what it's going to do is it's going to confound your initial plan. Because now, by giving up the pawn, although I agree with you, it's incorrect, it will at least stop the normal execution of your plan. And when you see high-level games, that is what you will often be analyzing. You won't, in fact, often in the high-level games, you won't see the mate with queen h4, f5, because black did something to prevent it before it even happens. So c4 is trying to throw a monkey wrench into it. So d4, mistake, probably. However, I still think this is plausible for white. I still like white's position. And now c5, again, trying to throw a wrench into it. And again, so even if we decide that objectively this is wrong, this is still correct from what I'm calling an ideological point of view, right? We must do something to disrupt white. And now white makes a mistake, and now e6 happens. Good move. And something I want to stress about this situation is that what you need to understand when you play this opening, and again, this will translate to other aspects of the game, is this guy can't just be dead weight. If he is dead weight and the bishop is not out and the rook is not out, we'd rather have him move backwards. But unfortunately, pawns can't move backwards, right? So already in this position, we are in grief. If this is allowed to happen, then this pawn is dead weight, right? So all of a sudden, it's difficult to know exactly how to play the position. On this move, for example, black should understand that this is necessary because if we take with the bishop, then this f5 move is on the table, maybe even now. And on f takes, well, maybe now we can play e5 with the idea of splitting these pawns. It'll be mildly similar to what could happen in the game, so let's talk about it. I do not like this move at all, e5. And one thing that's interesting about this to me is black takes. Now ask yourself, why was this move controversial? It was controversial because now you're going to free Federico the f-pawn. He gets out of prison, and therefore the bishop on c1 gets out of prison, and the rook on f1 gets out of prison. So when we're talking about, remember the element of time, it's important to see that we are giving white time by taking on e5 and liberating both of those two pieces. And that's the kind of thing I want to see more of in the notes, right? Because once you identify those features, right, that is where your chess understanding will really progress. And nota bene, when you do it, you might be thinking, oh, this is just about this one position. No, it's about all these positions. We want to be super sensitive to the careers of our minor pieces, right? So what would have been more thematic, or whatever you want to call it, knight takes d5, right? Don't free the f-pawn. No, don't do it. Okay, so we get this position, and now we have something, because the f-pawn got to move, something like a mess. And I don't know what's happening, but after something like bishop f4, maybe bishop g5, we have an interesting game on our hands, right? Yeah, we have an interesting game on our hands because we have chances of bringing the queen to h4 at some point, especially, of course, if we're going to wait till the queen moves. But we can think about a variety of things here. Absolutely. Bishop f4 comes to mind as the easiest. King h1, rook e8. Now, king h1, given as a question mark, I definitely like bishop f4 more. But in general, king h1, it's hard for me to believe that it's so bad. Rook e8 might be correct, but where it gets, let's say, flimsy, is I feel like he believes that pawns are people. And so just winning that pawn isn't necessarily the greatest thing for him, right? Okay, let's look at what happens. Bishop g5, queen c7. And now something here we're going to now talk about is time. I have a student who is not, who is a little bit in a slightly lower rating bracket, and he has begun chess. He's trying to get to 1800. He's almost there, 1800 chess.com. And he has never played an over-the-board tournament game. And the interesting thing about it is, the more I can force him to think longer and play in longer time controls, the more he is improving. That is the key part of his improvement. Like, we talk about everything. Openings, endgames, yada, yada. But getting him to slow down and think in terms of calculation and evaluation, that is where the improvement is happening. So, for example, in this position, although I think black is better, we still have ourselves a very interesting game on our hands. And white is going to completely collapse in the next couple of moves. And it's important to see, first of all, strong players, they don't, even when they get a bad position, they will make it hard for you. I can tell you that from experience. They will make it hard for you. And the way they do it is they realize, oh my God, I'm in a little trouble, and I'm really going to tank now to see if I can find a way to make my opponent's life miserable. If I don't, then I'm just going to collapse. And in general, the difference between strong players and weaker players is oftentimes seen in just the level of resistance. And so when, especially, you get a bad position, it's time to tank, because if you lose on time, that's fine. That's fine, buddy, if you're going to lose anyway, right? So, and also in the analysis of our games, this is really where we want to go deeper into the possibilities. For example, Morphy says knight b5 question mark, and earlier talks about his not using time, but this is a moment to think about what we might have done. And honestly, I think queen h4, it would be useful maybe even to spar with somebody at his level to see how it goes. The point is simple. If knight takes, we're going to make black think about knight e4 and maybe knight f6 next. What's the evaluation of the position? Interesting questions. Interesting questions. It's not, I believe in black's position here, but he is going to have to be a little careful because our friend knight f6 is coming. And black, what he did with rook e8 and queen c7 is, you can see he was obsessing about the pawn. And a theme that I like to talk about is the idea that pawns aren't people, and that in general what your opponents will be doing at this level is they will be playing for pawns, pawn structure, like they want to get a damaged pawn and stuff like that, instead of thinking about the pieces, and here the king possibly getting mated. So, interesting position. I think there's still everything to play for. In the game, things go downhill. We could have moved back. Now the knight will get cut, and we're just toast. Okay, so that is a typical game at the 1700 level, and I want people to see in particular that the study of openings here is not where it's at. It's thinking deeper, and what I want to stress again about thinking deeper is you are now at a level where you have the ability to understand some beautiful and interesting things that I've labeled as chess culture. And here at this band, we have, I'll repeat, the Capablanca endings, the tall games, the art of attack by Vukovic. These are all ways in which you can really deepen your understanding in a joyful way. And playing the longer games where you're finding yourself the ability to think long, right? It's hard. It's just understand your opponents are, especially in the online games, they're going to be moving quickly, right? To deepen yourself in those positions, that is where your progress will come. Okay, till next time.